Test. All right. Hey, everybody. Hey, Facebook Live. Hope you are doing well today. I am really excited because this is the big week. I know I've been talking about it a little bit. This is the big week where episode 100 drops. I mean, this will happen when you do a 7-day-a-week business podcast. You hit these milestones, and I didn't want to let this one go without celebrating it. So in a moment, I am actually going to hit the recorder and record this segment for the 100th episode. Now, you might have seen the segment that I did last week with my coach, Bob Kittredge, and we talked about the backstory. I mean, if you're like me and somebody's doing something and which is a little bit noteworthy, I want to find out the backstory. And so I actually brought my coach, Bob Kittredge, on, and you can watch the old footage from the Facebook Live if you go through my wall. And he shared some of the backstory, shared some of the things that I overcame, the things that we accomplished really together. And why did I do that? Well, I wanted to share a little bit of the backstory with all of the fans and listeners over at BeTheTalk.com. I also wanted to kind of, let you, Talk Universe, know that I'm walking the walk as well as talking the talk, literally, right? I'm being the talk, because in order to hit your highest potential, you're going to need a team of people, and you're not going to just be able to barter or, switch services or do something like that. You're going to have to invest in yourself also. So I wanted to I was a little curious. I wanted to hear what Bob would say. So in this segment, in a moment, I'm going to hit the recorder, and I'm going to list off by number my top 10 must-listen, can't-miss episodes. And ideally, I was going to have Angela Clockey, who was where is Angela's episode? Where was she? Here she is, 31, episode 31, Angela Clockey. Unfortunately, I was not, she is a busy lady, so I was not able to get her 2 cents on that. Instead, I'm just going to give you my 2 cents, and I'm going to do it in order. So, let's just jump right into it. As always, if you have comments or questions or thoughts, feel free to put them on in there in the comments, and I will acknowledge them, just not during the recorded segment. And I do have a countdown timer that's more to keep this segment nice and short. So feel free to let me know who's watching, where you're watching from, and I am going to jump on. This is hard to do with myself because I'm usually doing this to somebody else, but I'm going to do this to myself now. All right, Nathan, we are live in 3, 2. We're not live yet. I have to hit the button twice. Okay, we are live in 3, 2. Well, we are live with Nathan Eckel, who is also the voice behind this recording. Nathan, how are you doing today? Well, I'm doing just fine. Nathan, thank you very much. How do you do this, Talk Universe, when you are announcing and trying to wingman yourself in the interview? I don't know, but I wanted to record this segment because I wanted to introduce you to my coach, Bob Kittredge, who's going to be on in just a few minutes, and my good friend and episode 001, I brought him back, Lefford Fate, and you're going to hear some of his thoughts. He was the very first episode, and now it's 100 episodes later. I recorded a segment with him a few days ago and to be able to splice into this episode. Now, what is this episode all about? What are you talking for, Nathan? Well, I had a couple of agenda items. Number one, I had to let you know who Bob Kittredge was and reintroduce Lefford Fate to you as well, and really you're going to love the segments coming up. But I also wanted to just kind of share from the heart a little bit, and only take a couple of minutes in doing so, what I feel are the top 10 can't miss episodes. Now, I am skimming over episode 1 with Lefford Fate, and I figure you're going to all automatically listen to his episode just because he's got a whole segment here in the episode today. It's going to be a long episode. It's going to be an extra packed episode here today. And I just want to have all of these elements in it. And I may actually trim a little bit of the segments just so that it's not too long, and make those available as bonus segments as well. I'm still figuring it all out. But let's jump in to what I feel are the top 10 can't miss episodes. And these are completely subjective. Why? Because I came up with it, and I'm the person who's the host of the podcast. So I can't think of any other way to do this. And I'm going to do this in numerical order, just because it's easier for me to read these off. Are you ready? Well, I'm going to start with a pair. Episode 9 and episode 10. These are TEDx Charleston's finest. When you hear my interview with episode 1, Lefford Fate, I thank him for using his influence to getting me great interviews with other people there at TEDx Charleston. So episode 9 is Nancy Simpson. Episode 10 is Edie Cusack. Now we'll start with Edie. Edie, the mayor of Charleston, South Carolina, proclaimed, I forget which day it was, but she proclaimed it Edie Cusack Day. Why is that? Because Edie Cusack has taken people with developmental disabilities and who, if I remember correctly, had a 20% job placement rate. And because of Edie's work, she has flipped the number around. Now 80% instead of 20% are gainfully employed. And that's all because of Edie's work. So I think that makes it right there on the list. I want to tell you also about Dr. Nancy Simpson, who is a psychiatrist. This was an extremely brave branded talk that she gave at TEDx Charleston. Dr. Nancy Simpson, before she was a clinician and before she served patients and helped them, she was a patient. She was institutionalized for I guess what we would call mental illness or whatever. And she had the treatments and she had all of this, and we go into this in episode 9 of Be the Talk. We go behind the talk. And this is a favorite of every healthcare practitioner who has listened that has ever told me, feedback about Be the Talk podcast. They all say, Episode 9 with Dr. Nancy Cusack, Dr. Nancy Simpson. Episode 10 is Edie Cusack. I don't have my glasses on. Nancy Simpson is their favorite because as clinicians, as healthcare practitioners, they are amazed at the bravery and the honesty that Nancy displayed when she gave this talk, and how she went to school and learned, and went to graduate school, went to professional school, went and got all of her credentialing. And then after being a very highly regarded psychiatrist, went back in and gave this TEDx talk and basically outed herself as being a former patient, which is a major, in case you don't know it, in the world of mental health and healthcare and all that. You're just not allowed to say stuff like that. You're not allowed to, you're allowed to say, hey, I help patients and, I care, and you're allowed to share some stories and you're allowed to share case studies, but you're not allowed to say, I was a patient. I was institutionalized. I had this kind of therapy. You're not allowed. It is a taboo. It is a taboo. And because of the great work and the supportive work, I'm taking a little extra time here because TEDx Charleston has, I believe, should be commended. The speakers as well as the organizers for being so pro mental health and trying to take down these stigmas and these taboos. So anyway, listen to episode 9, listen to episode 10. They're two of my favorites. Here's another one, very, very popular for, it really is the, neck and neck up there, for the number one most popular, episode, another TEDx Charleston talk by Leah Colabello. This is episode 25. Episode 25 with Leah Colabello. Now, it's not about mental health. It's about ocean health, because it's about preventing plastic pollution. And so what Leah Colabello was able to do was give a great talk that really changed the world. I mean, Lefford Fate's talk is changing the world. Edie Cusack's talk changing the world. Nancy Simpson's talk changing the world. Leah Colabello's talk has resulted in, I believe, 20 restaurants in Charleston, South Carolina, basically foregoing the use of plastic straws. Now, I mean, I remember the first time that I heard about the plastic straws, and here's a metal straw, and I bring it around with me, and I put it in my drink, and I don't use. And I, really, until I talked to Leah, I didn't understand the scope of the problem. Okay. And you can test Nathan, you are just so narrow-minded, and you're not environmental enough. I think I might not be the only one who thought of that. Okay, is the plastic straw is that the biggest thing that's polluting the oceans? I think many of us, if we're really honest, think, hey, isn't there a bigger, badder thing out there? Well, it's really bad because it's really small. And Leah got dozens of restaurants to basically find alternatives to plastic. And it's the number one for many months on the podcast, the most popular of all. Now, that was kind of unseated. Leah's talk was unseated, and I guess technically it's number 2, but you could also argue that Leah's didn't have a add-on bonus episode, and the other one does. So I think Leah, I think there is an argument to still be made that Leah's is still number 1, or we could categorize it a little differently. What's the next one? Okay. Now, this one I am privy to. Okay, episode 39. Peter Buckland, Dr. Peter Buckland of Penn State University, who was talking about, and what was the name? What's the future hold? Ask a Metalhead was his TEDx Penn State University talk. Now, I love this episode because it's all about heavy metal music, okay? And if you are a child of the 80s, as I am and was, you remember that Public Enemy number 1, it wasn't the rap, it wasn't the rap group was Public Enemy number 1. Before the rap group, or in certain segments of maybe central Pennsylvania where I grew up that did not have a very proportional, it was kind of all, white people like me basically in central Pennsylvania in the 80s. So we didn't know about, Public Enemy being a rap group. We only knew that we weren't allowed to listen to the devil's music, which was heavy metal music. Okay. Anybody else relate to that? Okay. And some of it, I guess some of it is, because if you play the thing backwards, depending on the record, I mean, you hear stuff talking back to you. Yeah. And so this is a really, really fun interview with Peter Buckland, because he first of all, he basically says 90% of the stuff we listened to was junk. The parents were right. The authority figures were right. 90% of it was just there to be offensive and everything else. But then he zeroes in on the 10% that is a political statement, and it was a brilliant analysis, social analysis of, generational conflict and discord and hypocrisy and all of this stuff. And I even got to use the bleep button. Okay, I got to YouTube and find out the frequency to put into the software, the audio editing software, because I had to bleep out one of Dr. Peter Buckland's words in true heavy metal style. I don't know what's more metal than that. Maybe the whole interview being bleeped out, but it was more restrained than that. So that's a personal favorite for that reason. It's really a brilliant analysis. I love it. We're going to move on. Jeffrey Bloodworth, number 51, is really near and dear to my heart, because he was talking about how, being he called it a tragic optimist. Jeffrey Bloodworth, who I believe might also, I'm trying to remember, I think it was in northwestern Pennsylvania instead of central Pennsylvania. different TEDx, but he's also a college professor, talking about tragic optimism. So he was talking about personal stories that were just very, very tragic, okay, very, very sad, but yet he researches like society and trends and all of that, and things, despite all the doom and gloom and the heavy metal music that's out there, to perpetuate the joke from Dr. Buckland and keep that going and alive. Jeffrey Bloodworth says that basically things are getting better. Things are getting better. There's fewer war. There are some really bad things out there, but when you look at the big data, the trend is really unmistakable that things are getting better. Yet, in his own life, there's some very painful stories he shares. So I just thought it was a really, really brave interview. I thought it was really among the best interviews that we've ever had, that I've ever conducted here on Be the Talk, and it's really kind of what I always wanted this podcast to be about: people sharing from the heart. And I just loved the nuanced answers that he gave. So if you haven't listened to Jeffrey Bloodworth, episode 51, you really need to do so, because I just thought it was a great episode. It was a don't miss episode. Now we move on to episode 54. This was a double episode, 53 and 54. This was with Andrew Munns over at TEDx Jackson Hole, if I'm not mistaken. And he was a speaker a year after he was an MC. So episode 53, you hear me interviewing him with his speaker hat on. Episode 54, you hear me interview him and he has his MC on. Now, I know as I don't do a lot of MCing, but I recently MC'd a wedding that was actually a family wedding. And there are all kinds of dynamics as an MC that you are responsible for and have to be highly, highly aware of as an MC, that as a speaker, when it's your time to go on, if you are just kind of a novice speaker or a first-time speaker at a branded talk like a TEDx or any other, you might be unaware of some of these dynamics, the live feeling in the room. There is a real vibe in the room. And if you are not aware of that vibe and sensitive to that vibe, you could really fall flat. You could really fail to connect with other people in the room. So it's really critical, especially for those of you, I hope all of you, very few of you have ever given a TEDx talk or a branded talk before that are watching me right now. So all the rest of you, I would certainly hope that you would have on your bucket list, not even a bucket list, but not even the decade list, but the 5-year list or maybe the 3-year list to give some kind of a branded talk. You need to listen to episode 54 because we talk about these dynamics quite a bit. Moving onward, this one's great. If you love the Beatles, if you love the 60s, if you love kind of nostalgia, we debunk some of this in episode 63. I'm talking with Jan Haworth, who was the co-designer of the rock and roll album that Rolling Stone magazine, the editors of Rolling Stone magazine, picked her co-designed rock album as not the number 3 of all time, not the number 2 of all time, number 1 best rock and roll album of all time. Like millions of albums, okay? Garage bands, there are like millions of bands out there. Number 1 of all time. What is it? It's Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club. Lonely Hearts Band, by the Beatles. You ever hear of them? Yeah, the Beatles, the Fab Four. She co-designed their album. I got to interview her. It is episode 63. Many of you have never heard this episode. It's unbelievable. And we kind of debunk a little bit of the nostalgia and this thing about the 60s. It was really fun because I get to talk and interview and ask any question I want on this podcast. At one point I said to her, you were there in the 60s. You were influencing the 60s. You were making history in the 60s. how was it? It's like, what was it like? Was it utopia? Was it nirvana? Was it everything we thought it was? And she gave a great answer to that. I'm not even going to tell you what the answer is because I want you to listen to episode 63. All right, now we're going to move on. We're almost done. I think this is up to number 3 or number 7 of the top 10. Yael Warshel, who is also a professor at Penn State University of, I'm getting this wrong, it might be Palestinian studies or Middle East studies, something like that, but she's talking about very nuanced, very hot button issue, the Palestinian-Israeli, conflict and the role of the media in the conflict. And her question that she asked in her branded talk was, can media make peace? And there's this really fascinating study about Sesame Street in Palestine that they had it all translated in Arabic, I believe, and they did the study. And it was, if I remember correctly, it was inconclusive, the study. And so it was really fascinating to talk about that. Now, this was probably, it's on the list. You know why? Because I think this was the most nervous I've ever been, just because I know what a hot button issue this is. Dr. Warshel is extremely passionate about the study and the subject of this. And I was thinking about this the other day. After 100 episodes, what would I say if someone were to interview me? What is my favorite? What is my number one value with Be the Talk? What am I trying to really do here? I think number one is I'm trying to really honor and do justice to the work that my guests have put into their TEDx talk or other branded talk. I mean, they spent, 40, 50, 60 hours. I talked to someone last week who spent 8 months preparing, and this was a medical doctor who's an associate dean of a medical academic university. He spent 8 months. Okay. Now, I don't care if the person put in, 10 minutes preparing. Now, that probably wouldn't, make it on Be the Talk if they only did that. But regardless, is I want to respect them. I want to honor them. I want to honor their effort. That is really my top value. And at the risk of the number 2 value being you, Talk Universe, and producing really a fun, engaging, entertaining, kind of funny at times, whenever I can be a little bit of a goofball and have fun with people. Like last week I got to talk to the Scat Man, Ashwin Naidu. I mean, he calls himself the Scat Man. This is another PhD, but he calls himself the Scat Man. So, we're going to have some fun with that. So, but if someone's a little bit more serious, or if the topic is, not going to lend itself to goofing off, I am not going to go goof off about it. Talk Universe. Okay. So those are kind of my 2 values, and very close behind is to produce as engaging, entertaining, empowering, educational content that I possibly can for you. But even more than that, just a little bit more than that, if I have to choose between the 2, it's going to be honoring and respecting the nature of the talk that people gave. And with Yael, Dr. Yael Warshel, I was trying to really be a good interviewee. I think I succeeded. And remember when I told you that Leah Colabella's talk was number 1 for month after month after month? Well, I did a bonus episode with a little bit of bonus content, not a bonus episode, but bonus content that is really essentially the same as a bonus episode with Dr. Warshel. And so that actually became the number 1 most downloaded episode because it was really 2 segments in one. And so the numbers worked out that way. So those 2 are really, kind of the most popular. Now, moving on, episode 81. Kathy Armias is organizer for TEDx Portland, which I believe, if I understand correctly, is the largest TEDx event in the United States of America, possibly, actually bigger. It might be more. I may not remembering correctly, but I believe the United States of America, the largest one is TEDx Portland, based on the information I was given. This is the first time And again, Lefford Fate helped me get this one. Thank you, Lefford. Kathy Ormias is the organizer. So I had wanted to talk with an organizer for months after doing this, and it had been, 50 episodes, 60 episodes, 70 episodes, 80 episodes. I finally got to speak to an organizer, but we spoke episode 80 with her speaker hat on because she's awesome, and she gave her own, several talks, just like a regular TEDx speaker, but then she's also an organizer. So I said, let's do another episode in its own right from your organizer hat on. So with Andrew Munns, we did in episode number 54, we talked about the MC's role, and in episode 81, can't miss, because she talks about what does an organizer look for, what is a good way to be a real clutch speaker for an organizer. How do you become the most reliable speaker out of the 20 or 30 or 40 speakers at your event? Know what the organizer values and make it really easy for the organizer to work with you. Okay. Now, what's my final can't miss episode? Episode 85. Dave Blanchard, okay, CEO of the Og Mandino Institute. Now, anybody heard that name? Anybody recognize that distinctive name, Og Mandino? The greatest salesman in the world, 25 million copies sold. Dave Blanchard is CEO of the Og Mandino Institute, and he is just a thought leader in his own right, because he wrote a book that is kind of prefaced on the teachings of the greatest salesman in the world, and really highlights some really critical ways in which entrepreneurs in particular, we entrepreneurs are visualizing, and we're missing the mark just slightly through visualizing the wrong thing. And in order to hear how simple the switch is, but how critical it is, and the consequences, the dire consequences that happen when you and I visualize slightly the wrong thing instead of tweaking it just a little bit, the visualization, you're going to have to listen to that episode 85. All right, I have been talking for longer than I wanted to talk, so I'm going to figure out what to do with this footage. And thank you very much. Now, we're going to listen to Bob Kittredge. We're also going to listen to Lefford Fate here on episode 100. Thank you for celebrating with me, Talk Universe, and enjoy. All right, well, that's how I do this. I guess I guess this is a little harder to be a guest on your own podcast when you don't have anybody there to interview you or to introduce it, and so yeah, that felt really strange, but I need to record this stuff. I need to splice this stuff. I need to give you something, because this thing drops on Wednesday. It's less than 48 hours away. It's about 36 hours from now this thing is going to drop. All right. Lefford, wow, look at this. Speak of the angel over here, all right? Lefford Fate leaving comments, okay? I can't get away from this guy. I love it, all right? Andrea Rojas, thank you so much. Def Leppard, I think that's when we're talking about heavy metal with Peter Buckland. Seriously, you guys, I mean, I think I had the most fun with Dr. Peter Buckland, just because, and he ends it up, I said, thanks for coming on the show, and then he says, horns up, okay, which I think is the, horns from, I'm not a devil worshiper. I probably shouldn't joke about that, but he says horns up as his final, goodbye to us talking, which I just thought was really perfect, okay? And knowing, just that interview with Dr. Buckland, it was probably facetious. It was probably true to the idiom and just the overhyped, warnings about all of that we got, in our movies and in our, in our youth groups and all of that 30 years ago, which was not completely without merit, okay? I just got a little kick out of it, all right? Wow, one of these was Andrea's favorite TEDx. I don't know which one. Hey, thank you for commenting. Hey, everybody, I'm going to shut it down just shy of 30 minutes here. Go to BeTheTalk.com, subscribe, leave a review, check it out, and give your talk to change the world. How do I shut this down in time? There it is.